I spent 10 days in total silence, meditating for over 100 hours. I walked in skeptical, feeling broken, and just desperate for a change. I walked out a different person. But the wildest part? I have the brain scans from before and after, and they give us a peek at what was actually going on inside my head. In this video, I'm going to share the raw, unfiltered story of what I went through, the excruciating pain and the profound breakthroughs. Then, I'm going to show you the fascinating scientific data that hints at what a little silence and a whole lot of self-observation can do to your brain. My life before this felt like a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. It was a non-stop barrage of notifications, deadlines, and an inner monologue that scrolled like a stock ticker on a really bad day. I was chronically overstimulated, and the noise wasn't just outside, it was inside my own skull. I was having trouble sleeping, exhausted by the anxiety of not sleeping, yet totally unable to find real rest. I felt stuck, like a passenger in my own life, just reacting to everything without any real control. It was like my brain was a browser with way too many tabs open, all the time, and the whole system was starting to crash. I'd heard about Vipassana meditation, this ancient, secular technique that supposedly teaches you to see things as they really are. It's not about religion, it's an operation of the mind. The premise is simple, but absolutely brutal: 10 days of complete silence. No talking, no reading, no writing, no eye contact, no phones. You just sit, with yourself. The idea terrified me, which is exactly how I knew I had to do it. I felt this quiet desperation, a need to do something drastic, to maybe break my brain a little so I could put it back together in a better way. I booked a 10-day course, got my brain scan done, and drove to the middle of nowhere, ready to hand over my phone and, hopefully, all the noise that came with it. Section 1. The Before, a portrait of a noisy mind. To really get the transformation, you have to understand where I started. My before state wasn't some dramatic, movie-style rock bottom. It was more like a slow, creeping erosion of my own well-being. On the surface, things looked fine. I had a job, friends, the usual signs of a functioning adult life. But internally, I was running on fumes. My mind was a constant storm of what-ifs and should-haves. I'd lie awake at night replaying conversations, stressing about the future, and picking apart past mistakes. It was exhausting. It's the perfect recipe for anxiety, and I was living it daily. My focus was completely shot. I'd sit down to work, and within minutes, my mind would just wander off, pulled away by a random thought, a notification, or the urge to check something, anything else. This wasn't just wrecking my productivity, it was wrecking my ability to be present. I could be talking to someone I cared about and realize, with a jolt of guilt, that I hadn't heard a single word they said. Physically, I was a knot of tension. My shoulders were permanently hunched up by my ears, and my jaw was always clenched. I was dealing with chronic back pain, a souvenir from old injuries that stress and bad sleep made so much worse. The world felt muted. Food was just fuel. Music was just background noise. Everything was filtered through this layer of mental fog. And then there was the reactivity. A minor inconvenience, like hitting traffic or spilling coffee, could send a totally disproportionate surge of anger through me. I was a slave to my emotional impulses, reacting to life's ups and downs like a puppet on a string. This is a classic pattern of a mind caught in cycles of craving and aversion, either desperately wanting something to be different or desperately pushing it away. I didn't know it at the time, but this was the very mechanism I was about to confront head-on. I went in for a functional MRI, a scan that measures brain activity by tracking blood flow. My hypothesis, based on how I felt, was that my brain was in a state of chaotic, inefficient overdrive. The neurologist explained we'd be looking at a few key areas: the default mode network, DMN, which is tied to mind wandering, the amygdala, the brain's stress center, and the prefrontal cortex, which handles things like focus. This before scan was my baseline, a snapshot of my brain on noise. I had no idea how stark the contrast would be with the after. Section 2. The during deconstruction in silence. The first day felt like a bizarre social experiment. A bunch of us strangers arrived, took a vow of noble silence, and surrendered our phones. The silence fell, and it was jarring. The schedule was relentless. Wake up at 4 a.m. to a soft gong. Meditate from 4:30 to 6:30. Breakfast. More meditation. Lunch at 11 a.m. More meditation. A small snack in the evening, no dinner. A final talk and one last meditation before bed at 9 p.m. That's 10 hours of meditation a day. The first 3 days were, to put it lightly, hell. It was a war, mentally and physically. Stripped of all my usual distractions, my mind went into absolute overdrive. It was louder than ever. Every worry, every embarrassing memory, every single to-do list item came screaming to the surface. It's a common thing. When you cut off external input, the brain just starts digging through its own files. The physical pain was unreal. I'd never sat cross-legged for more than a few minutes. Now I was supposed to sit still for an hour at a time. My back, already a problem area, felt like it was on fire. My knees ached. My legs fell asleep. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to just move, to fidget, to get up and run out of there. During a check-in with the teacher, I basically confessed that I was panicking. His advice was maddeningly simple: just observe it. Notice the sensation. Don't call it pain. Just feel the heat, the pressure, the tingling. And know that this, too, will pass. The first technique we learned was anapana, focusing only on the breath coming in and out of your nostrils. That's it, for 3 full days. The goal is to sharpen your concentration. But my mind was like a wild puppy. It would stay on the breath for a few seconds, then dart off into a fantasy, a worry, a song stuck in my head. I'd get lost for minutes at a time. It was so humbling and frustrating to see just how little control I had over my own attention. On day 3, I was so close to quitting. The physical agony and mental chaos just felt unbearable. Then, on day 4, something shifted. We were introduced to the actual Vipassana technique, the body scan. You move your attention through the body, from head to toe, and just observe whatever sensations you find, without reacting. It doesn't matter what you feel: pain, pleasure, a weird tingle, numbness, heat, cold. You just observe it with balance. The whole point is to understand impermanence directly, by feeling it in your own body. You're learning to break the habit of blind reaction. This is where the rewiring begins. Neuroscientists talk about neuroplasticity, how meditation can physically change the brain. By repeatedly stopping your automatic reactions, like flinching from pain or latching onto a pleasant feeling, you are literally forging new neural pathways. You're training the rational rider to have more influence over the powerful, automatic elephant. And then, it just clicked. As I scanned my body, I noticed the burning in my back. But this time, instead of identifying with it, I just watched it. And I saw it wasn't one solid thing. It was a collection of shifting sensations: heat, tightness, a pulse. As I watched it without judgment, its power over me started to fade. Then, a wave of pleasant, tingling feelings swept through my arm. My first instinct was to cling to it, to want more. But the instruction was the same: just observe. And just like the pain, the pleasure also changed. It arose, and it passed away. That was the light bulb moment. I saw, not as an idea but as a direct experience, that my suffering came from my reaction to these sensations. Either pushing away the bad ones or grasping for the good ones. My entire life had been this unconscious dance. For the first time, I felt a space open up between the sensation and my response. In that space was freedom. Tears just started streaming down my face. The rest of the retreat wasn't easy, but it was different. There were still moments of intense pain and crazy mental chatter. Some meditations were blissful. Other times, old, buried emotions like anger and sadness would surge up with shocking force. But now, I had a tool. I could sit with the anger, feel it as heat in my chest and a knot in my stomach, and just watch it, knowing it would also pass. It was like I was finally learning to sit through the storm instead of being thrown around by it. By day 9, this deep sense of peace had settled in. The mental chatter was a whisper. The world seemed vibrant and alive. Section 3. The afterlife on the other side of silence. On the morning of the 10th day, the noble silence was lifted. The sound of my own voice was strange. Talking to the other participants was surreal. For 10 days, they were just silent figures. Now they were real people, and we all shared this bizarrely profound experience. There was this immediate, deep connection. Driving away from the center was a sensory explosion. The green of the trees seemed impossibly bright. I put on some music, and it was so rich and layered it almost made me cry. I stopped for a simple meal, and the taste was electric. It was like my senses had been scrubbed clean. In the weeks and months that followed, the changes were less about sensory fireworks and more about a fundamental shift in my baseline. The constant, low-grade anxiety? Gone, replaced by a sense of calm. Of course, I still felt stress and negative emotions. I'm still human, but they didn't hijack me anymore. They'd show up, feel less personal, and pass more quickly. What researchers call decreased emotional reactivity just felt like I was no longer a puppet to my feelings. My focus was dramatically better. I could actually sit and work for hours. This lines up with studies showing how meditation strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles concentration. I was also sleeping better than I had in years. My relationships improved. Because I wasn't lost in my own head all the time, I could actually listen. I was more present with people, more patient, and more empathetic. But the most profound change was in my relationship with myself. The practice of observing everything without judgment had turned into a greater sense of self-acceptance. That inner critic got a lot quieter. I had more balance. I continued meditating daily, usually for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. It wasn't a one-time fix, it was a tool I had to keep using. The retreat taught me that peace isn't about finding a life without problems, but about finding the ability to be with your problems without being consumed by them. Section 4. A look inside my brain. The scan results. Now for the part you've been waiting for. My personal experience was profound, but I'm a skeptical person. I had to know, was this incredible shift just a good story I was telling myself, or did something measurably change in my brain? A few weeks after the retreat, while keeping up my daily practice, I went back for my fMRI scan. When I sat down with the neurologist to compare the results, I was floored. The changes weren't subtle, they were dramatic. First, we looked at the default mode network, DMN. That's the network that's fired up when your mind is wandering, daydreaming, ruminating, thinking about anything but the here and now. My before scan showed a super active DMN, which perfectly matched my experience of a chaotic, busy mind. In the after scan, the activity in my DMN was significantly quieter. This suggested my brain was spending less energy on aimless, stressful thoughts and was more efficient at staying present. I had scientifically observable evidence that I was reining in my wandering mind. Next, we looked at the amygdala, the brain's alarm system that triggers our fight or flight response. My before scan showed an amygdala that was working overtime, indicating chronic stress. In the after scan, there was a visible decrease in the reactivity of my amygdala. Now, to be clear, studies on long-term meditators have shown that meditation can lead to a reduction in the amygdala's gray matter volume, but that usually takes consistent practice over 8 weeks or more. My 10-day sprint probably didn't shrink it, but seeing its alarm bell activity dial down was incredible. It explained why I felt less reactive to stress. Then, the most exciting part. We looked at the prefrontal cortex, the area associated with awareness, concentration, and decision-making. Here, we saw that the connection seemed stronger and more coordinated. Again, long-term studies have shown that meditation can actually lead to an increase in gray matter in this region. basically building a stronger muscle for focus. While my scan didn't measure that, it showed that the area responsible for paying attention was working more robustly. My brain was adapting to the task I had given it, paying attention. Finally, we looked at connectivity. The after scan showed that the communication line between the prefrontal cortex, the rational, thinking part, and the amygdala, the emotional, reactive part, appeared to be stronger. This is emotional regulation in action. I had strengthened the neural pathway that allows me to pause, observe an emotion, and choose how to respond, rather than just blindly reacting. The rider was learning how to guide the elephant. These weren't just passing feelings. The scans painted a picture of functional changes that lined up perfectly with my experience. Seeing the data laid out in front of me was a revelation. The calmness I felt wasn't an illusion. The increased focus wasn't just a placebo. The 100 hours of silent, often painful, work had started to rewire my brain to be more resilient, focused, and calm. So, what did 10 days of silent meditation do to my brain? It broke it down and started rebuilding it, piece by piece. It quieted the noise, calmed my inner alarm system, and strengthened my ability to focus. It proved to me that we are not just passive victims of our own minds. Neuroplasticity is real. We can intentionally shape our brains, and therefore our lives, for the better. This journey was one of the hardest things I have ever done, but it was also, without a doubt, the most rewarding. It gave me a practical tool to deal with life and cultivate real peace from within. It wasn't a magic pill, it was a workout, and it's a workout I have to keep showing up for. The point of this video isn't to convince you to go on a 10-day silent retreat, although if you feel that pull, I can't recommend it enough. The point is to show you what's possible. It's a message of hope. You don't have to live at the mercy of your anxious, racing mind. Change is possible, not just as a feeling, but as a potential reality in your own brain. And if you're interested in exploring the power of the mind, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've got a lot more to share. Thanks for watching.